Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting, Children and Young People's Scrutiny Panel meeting. I'm the chair of this committee, Councillor Makbule Gunes. I represent Tottenham Green. I will take the introduction initially from the members who are present. Then we will go to co-opted members as well as the officers who are present. Yeah, Josh.
Evening, everyone. Councillor Josh Dixon, the councillor for Alexandra Ward, a member of this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Tammy Palmer. I'm the Opposition Children and Family spokesperson and a member of this committee.
Councillor Zina Brabazon, I am the Cabinet Member for Early Years, Children and Families.
Councillor, you're on mute.
Apology for that. Yes, can we take the introduction from the co-opted members? I know, Lords, you are here. Yvonne, can we? And Councillor James is also joining us remotely. Yeah. Sorry, can I just take Councillor James first? Then, yeah. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Councillor Sarah James, member of this committee, not in the room. Well, I am hopefully participating online. Thank you.
Thank you. Lords?
I'm Lewis Keever. I'm one of the co-optees and I represent the Diocese of Westminster.
Yvonne, are you there? Would you like to briefly introduce yourself? Thank you.
I'm Yvonne Denny and I'm the representative from the London Diocesan Board.
Anita, can we have a brief introduction from you?
Yes, you can. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anita Jaku and I am a governor at Campsbourne Primary School and a resident of the borough.
You're on mute, Councillor.
Sorry. James, would you like to quickly introduce yourself? Sorry, just literally walked in.
Yeah, I'm Councillor James Cheering-Cundall, Councillor for Barnes Green. Sorry for being a bit late.
Thank you for that. Rob, Anne, and all the officers who are joining us remotely. Anne, can we take...
My name's Anne Graham. I'm Director of Children and Young People Services. Thank you.
Rob Mack, Scrutiny Support Officer.
Remotely joining us is Evelyn. Evelyn, would you like to introduce yourself quickly? Then Jackie.
Hi, Evelyn Moody, Director.
Good evening, everyone. Jackie DeFalco, Assistant Director for Early Help Prevention and SEND.
Thank you. Anthony?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Parker, Head of Children's Commissioning for North Central London CCG.
Yeah. Beverly?
Good evening. My name is Beverly Hendricks. I'm the Assistant Director for Safeguarding Haringey Children's.
Great. Have I called everyone or have I missed anyone? Is there anyone who haven't had the chance to introduce themselves? No, seems like everybody did that. Okay, thank you very much for that. I just would like to draw the meeting's attention to the statement about filming, that by entering the meeting room and using the public sitting area, you are consenting to being filmed and to be possibly used to the possible use of those images and sound recording. So by coming to this meeting, you're basically agreeing to be filmed and that film to be used subsequently on. Thank you for that. Any apologies for absence, Rob?
Apologies for absence. An apology for absence has been received from Kanupriya Junjun Walla, one of the co-opted members, parent governor rep.
James?
Yeah, I just apologies from Councillor Sarah James. She's not able to be here, but she's hoping to join virtually because she has a very bad cough and didn't want to put other people off.
Thank you for that, James. She's already here and has joined us virtually. Thank you for that. Any items of urgent business?
No, Chair.
Sorry, Mac Beeley, very quickly, do we have any apologies from Councillor Stone and Councillor Ibrahim, who appear not to be here?
I've relayed the apologies that I've received so far.
Thank you for that, Rob. Declaration of interest. Any members and co-opted members who have a declaration of interest to declare? None. Thank you. Item 5, deputation, petition, presentation and questions. We will be to consider any request received in accordance with Part 4, Section B, Paragraph 29 of the Council Constitution. Do we have any deputation and petition, Rob?
Yes, we have a deputation from Amanda Jane, who's sitting over there at the moment, regarding, she's one of a group of SEND parents, and the grounds for her deputation, well, she'll no doubt bring that out when she introduces it. It's been accepted.
Thank you for that. Minutes of the last meeting, apologies, minutes of the last meeting. Any issues, concerns, or anything that was not correct, or any correction, members? No, so can we approve the minutes then?
Agree.
Agreed. I will now be taking the deputation from parent representatives of SEND children. Amanda, you have 3 minutes to present your case. Then subsequently there will be like 12-15 minutes for questions and questions that members and the co-opted members would like to ask you. Would you like to start your deputation, Amanda? Thank you for attending.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of quite a few thousand families that live in Haringey. The main reason for the deputation is the council have had obviously an Ofsted and CQC inspection, and as is usual, the parents don't have a say in any of the scrutiny panels that happen. The consultations, yes, of course, they do go out, but it's known that it doesn't get to every single parent. There's a huge disparity in income in our borough. So we have affluent families on one side of the borough, or more affluent families on one side of the borough, and on the opposite side of the borough, we've got some low income families. Now, when we are talking about co-production, we are often asked what it means for us as parents and carers. I am very interested in why it is, or not just myself, I'm speaking, when I say I'm speaking for our entire community. The onus isn't on us. The judgment wasn't made to us, it was made by the CQC and Ofsted. So we've always wanted to work in co-production. This is not the first time that this subject has been broached. We have families who are homeless. We have members of the community who are trying to do their own. We have our own grassroots support groups, and also funded by ourselves in whatever shape, way or form we can. And what is evident to all of us is that we are heard, but we're not listened to. We are faced with professionals every day. I have letters after my name, so I'm qualified. In my profession, I'm qualified, makes me a professional. But in terms of parents and carers, when it comes to caring for our children, when it comes to, and our adults, we are the professionals, but we are never allowed into this kind of setting and forum to give our views. Now we're in a position where Ofsted have produced this report. It's almost like we have 70 days to fix over 5 decades worth of failures. And it isn't a criticism towards Haringey in the sense that it's a them and us. The culture has come about because of the treatment that the families have received. We do have advocates within the council, but it's like having a lion with no teeth, and the lion's expected to go out and, defend the realm. Imagine being told that help is there in whatever shape, way or form. We have children who are physically disabled, quadriplegic. They have, it's not just about autism is what I'm saying. What about the blind? What about the deaf? What about cerebral palsy? What about the litany of the range, that falls within the SEND bracket? Now, when we are asked, when we're told we're going to have a consultation, for example, on transport, the outcome is based on who has who's answered the call. But remember, in the beginning, I said low-income families. A lot of families don't have access to internet, and Haringey, for whatever reason, have only pushed that. Everything that we need is online. So any service you need, you have to go online. We're living in a time of unprecedented times. However, we've all learned about the digital media now, so we can have these meetings and stuff. But throughout the year, there was nothing, and people suffered even more than they usually do. When you talk about an EHC, transport, environment, housing, and education are all in that bracket. And invariably, one affects the other, which you can't have it separate. So here, today, we are talking about children and young people. Fine. Early years are in this too, because they are in the SEND, under the SEND umbrella. They then turn into children and young people. And then the children and young people turn into adults. But there isn't sufficient adult support and social care. And these are things that we've been screaming about for years. And then the Ofsted report comes and says exactly the same thing, which now means that we are in a position where it's not so much I told you so, it's this is what is. So co-production, we are interested in co-production and coming to the table, but that means having a representative in a forum like this, having a representative in the scrutiny panel for housing, for education, for adult needs and social care. And so today, what I want to say is this. All of the information that has been amassed by Haringey, we are the data. I'm here to speak on behalf of the data. We are also the service user. I'm here to represent the service users. We are also the grassroots of support for autistic children and special educational needs and their disabilities. I hope I haven't gone over by 3 minutes. I would like to end by saying the needs of the one, which in this case is Haringey, they need to get a working statement of action prepared in time to meet the 70-day deadline. So the needs of the one, does the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many, which is the entire community, the SEND community in Haringey? Just a footnote on that, the amount of languages that are spoken in this borough, how are those people being accessed? We've all started our own little groups. We have, parent groups in schools. We have parent groups in, I'll say Haringey Sixth Form because I'm the person that has created that. But we have not got anywhere where we can be listened to, appreciated, and heard. Bottom line, what really needs to happen is that we need some semblance of a truth and reconciliation. There are parents out there who are livid. There are parents out there who are stressed. That stress is then passed on to the children and young people. So it's a vicious cycle. Haringey.
Amanda, apologies. I don't want to interrupt you, but your time has.
Not a problem.
I tried to sort of allow you to finish your.
Not a problem.
But please wrap up, and there will be opportunity for.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for that presentation, for that deputation. It's really important that obviously, we engage with parents, carers of children with SEND, and we know that historically there have been some difficulties, some issues, and I think what sort of came out for me more strongly is like heard but not listened to. I think you're absolutely right that you don't need to be only heard, but you need to be listened. You need to be part of the co-production. Okay, I'm going to take some questions from colleagues. I don't know who was first, but I can see all three of you. Tammy, we will start with you. Josh, James, and me. Okay, Josh, James, and Tammy.
Thank you. And thank you, Amanda, as well, and to all the parents who I know are pushing day in, day out to make sure that you're not just heard but listened to as well. And I hope in the spirit of that today, I think your comments around representation on scrutiny panels is something that could be taken seriously if that is something that we can do. I think ensuring that people with lived experience are sat around the table to be heard and to be involved in those discussions is something that can be looked at in future. My question will focus primarily on, I guess, co-production itself. I'd be interested to know whether you think currently the council are making the adequate arrangements to engage people sufficiently with enough notice, and if not, I guess, can you expand on what those failings are? Because I think part of learning is actually looking at where those failures lie and really considering how we can improve the situation. I think your reference to online consultations only, that's incredibly worrying considering the lack of, I guess, internet access for a lot of people and the barrier in terms of accessible information. So that was a bit of a long question, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, and I'm at a disadvantage because I've left my glasses at home. So the statement that I had sent, you've received that, I emailed it to everybody. So Co-production means exactly what it says by definition. Not being told what to do, not being told this is how we think it should go. What do you think? How can we work together? Most importantly is the time frame. We cannot have, Haringey have at the moment, we organising a series of events for them to facilitate satisfying the terms of this Ofsted report. We were not given 21 days. Some families haven't even got the memo. The ones that have been able to kind of stand up and be counted and be involved, we're talking about, for the parents that I have personally spoken to, anything from finding out in the last week to maybe 18 days. 21 days minimum would be acceptable, I think, but that's me talking, and I'm not sure how everybody else listening to this webcast will respond to that. They may want more time. What I do know is that there is ample opportunity to engage with every single parent or every single family on that register, even if it is by letter. And my reason for saying this is because we had a consultation about the CDC earlier this year, and not everybody got the memo. It was kind of put in the newsletter, but again, not everybody has had access to that. But at the same time, the area of Haringey that I live, there was a consultation going on, an environmental consultation going on, and every single household in my neighbourhood was given a hand-delivered letter on the consultation, irrespective of whether they had a vehicle or not. Does the needs of the environment around CPZ, is that higher or more important than the send agenda? I don't think so, and I let that be known. And Haringey sent the letter out to everybody, and the consultation was extended. So I know the capability is there. And if we are talking about co-production, it is to be accessible to everybody. It isn't just about us forming a parent-carer forum. It is about including all of the grassroots organisations and little groups are in on this co-production, because they are providing a service. As much as the children and young people require the care and attention, there are parents that are on antidepressants because of their personal situation, and unfortunately, it is because of the borough council. These are words that I've heard from people. I'm not making this up. Like I said, I come here to speak on behalf of everyone, and maybe, there might be people saying, she hasn't said this, she hasn't said that. There's too much, and that's the point. Co-production means that we are informed, we are invited. It was by chance that I found out about this meeting, and I found out on Friday night. I typed the letter, and then I started to phone around parents. So for 7 hours worth of networking, we were able to produce the statement that I forwarded to you. We were able to get the signatures. By the Constitution, it says 3 clear days before the meeting. So we know it has to be in by 10 o'clock on Sunday. And I'm at River Park House at 11 o'clock on Sunday night and there's no letterbox. So how are we supposed to do this? And here we go. For me, that's the irony. We as parents and carers of SEND little ones, young people and adults have so many hoops that we need to jump through. And in order for me to have the opportunity to sit in front of you here today, this is what I had to do. I'm sure you all received, when you opened your emails, your email from me, you would have been surprised that it was 3:20 something in the morning, Sunday morning, because I was adamant to get it in before your deadline. So if that answers your question, okay.
Sorry, can we make sure our questions are succinct and our answers as well? That's just because of the time limit we have. Apollo, I've got lots of people, 2 people also indicating that they would like to ask questions. So I want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask their question and you can answer. I mean, I completely understand there's a lot you want to say and, you know, your experience, just really valuable for us to hear as well. But please keep it very short, both the questions and the answers, if you could. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. You mentioned, of course, the Ofsted report. Now, of course, a lot of the things that are in the Ofsted report were in this scrutiny panel's examination of SEND between 2018 and 2020, the report of which came out in January 2020. And at the end of 2020, we had a report on action taken, which started with co-production. Now, co-production is the sort of mantra, and rightly so, of this administration, but it has to deliver. And what you are saying is that for SEND, it hasn't delivered. So the point is, you mentioned 70 days, but it's not 70 days. The same things were said 2 years ago, many of them. Now, what I wanted to ask you was about the follow-up to the AMAZE report, which you mentioned, and the Parent Carers Forum. And specifically, what has been the experience of SEND parents of the working of this Parents Carers Forum? Because a lot of store was set by it when, in terms of action taken on the scrutiny report of 2 years ago. So yes, what has been your experience of that? And if it hasn't worked, which is what you suggest, what do you think should be done apart from having a co-opted member perhaps on a scrutiny committee like this that could make the Parent Carers Forum effective in terms of co-production? Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question, because yet again, the onus seems to be on us. The AMAZE report said that there was a suggestion that a parent carer forum needed to be set up by 2020. I can't remember the month. I believe it was October, it was July. So the process and I was part of that process, but the process for us started in November of last year, when we started to, look seriously at the specifications and the setting up of. It wasn't until July of this year that Bridge Renewal Trust was appointed. And we are nowhere near kind of having any formal kind of setup, because the parents don't know enough about it, because the initial information that went out inviting us to a consultation with the view of having a parent carer forum was sent digitally. So always there is a huge percentage who are just sidelined because they don't have access to that. And the language, if English is not your first language, how are you going to be able to? So how it stands now for myself, what I think personally, because I can only speak for myself, it's baby steps. We are kind of still in embryonic form. So we are all learning on the job. My experience over the last 24 years has brought me to this place. I've been a parent governor of both state and special schools, and there is a level of co-production, but it's not on our terms. So if it's not on our terms and we're now being asked, what is it that we want to see? What does co-production mean to us? By definition, what does the word co-production mean? There is the answer. If Haringey are serious about this and they really want this, then we do need a seat round the table. A lot of parents shy away from it because of the jargon and the acronyms and the whole bureaucratic thing that goes on that nobody understands. So I feel that where we are at the moment in setting up the forum and the initiatives that Haringey have initiated thus far, I can't really comment because it hasn't begun yet. It doesn't start till next week, in essence. But how are you going to get a clear view of all of the families' views? The other thing is that young people need to also be involved. They may have special educational needs and disabilities. Some indeed may be mute, but they have a voice, so they need to be here too. That is part of co-production from where I sit. And I would feel that the parents that have children who are able to do so would welcome their input too as part of co-production. So I'm sorry if I haven't given you a definitive answer, because it's very hard to answer something that hasn't happened yet.
Thank you. Yes, please keep your questions and answers short, because I'm keen to give everybody the opportunity to have their turn to ask a question. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Chair, and Amanda, thank you, and thank you to all the parents that aren't here as well. And I think it's pretty clear to us all that 12 minutes isn't long enough to hear fully what you have to say. Councillor Brabazon, my questions are for you actually, and I know you're going to provide a summary, so rather than answering my questions now, perhaps you could answer them in your summary. What do you think has led these parents to feel that they had no other choice but to come here tonight to give us this deputation? That's my first question for you. My second question is, do you acknowledge that there are clearly huge failures in this service that we must address urgently? And my third point to you, Councillor Brabazon, is what will you commit to addressing as a Cabinet member this evening?
Thank you for that, Tammy. And like you said, we will probably come back to Councillor Brabazon to answer those questions when she's answering other questions as well. So I'm gonna basically now go to the first hands I saw was Councillor James, then Michelle and Anita. Can we take it in that order? Sarah, to you, then followed by Michelle, then Anita. Please keep your questions and comments slightly short so that we can accommodate everybody's question. Thank you very much.
Don't worry, I'll be very brief. Thank you very much for the deputation. I particularly wanted to join the meeting to hear what you had to say. What I'd like to know from the point of view of send parents and carers. There seems to have been going on for a long time, this problem with communication, complaints about lack of co-production and so on. What, from your point of view, would be, if you like, quick wins that the council could introduce to begin to build a bit of trust? What would make a difference to the way things are, business is being conducted, if you like, that you could look at and say, well, that's a positive. That shows that there's a serious intent to change. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Truth and reconciliation is the answer. Truth and reconciliation. The families should have, even if they do vent or they do, want to storm the castle, Haringey are in a position, a very unique situation now, and we must be heard. We should be heard. We've been listening for years. For years. I met a lady recently, happens to sit on the Parent Carer Forum, whose son is 2 years younger than I am, and I'm 53. So that means that this has been going on for 5 decades. Truth and reconciliation. It's time for parents to be heard. It's time for parents to be listened to. First of all, that will begin to show parents that, okay, there may be, this is different. There is a little bit of change here. First and foremost, I don't honestly, for the parents that I've spoken to, that's the consensus that I get. The people who are waiting for services, it's not our fault if the staff isn't there or people are off sick. It's not our fault that nobody answers the phone. Answer the phone, answer emails, not generic emails either. Somebody needs to take the time to answer the hundreds of emails that come in from parents and are not answered. But it starts with truth and reconciliation.
Thank you for that, Amanda. Michelle, can we have your question? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My questions are to Councillor Brabazon. Can she first of all answer my emails? I'm glad we touched on emails. We send emails perpetually. I have a son to look after who has autism, and it's a lot of hard work. Plus I work full time, and a decent thing to do would be to communicate effectively and acknowledge people's correspondence. That's number one. Number two, this is a collective. Although Amanda is speaking in the room, can hold on a second? Although Amanda is speaking in the room, this was the last minute ditch by a lot of parents, and the driver behind it was absolute frustration. Why is it that we keep on having circular reasoning with no resolve? It's the same items on the agenda perpetually. It's about communication, educational healthcare plans, lack of trust between the parents and the service providers. And that's endemic of accountability. They keep giving us slop and expecting us to just sail along with it. Well, we say so far and no more. So I'm glad that the council around that table, it is amazing that we are coming back with the same questions which were on the table in 2018. This is a lot of money being spent and we have no destination. There needs to be accountability and it needs to be clear and transparent. And the communication, the Amaze report, we spent a lot of money on the Amaze report, and I spent time going to a lot of those meetings, and the recommendations are still not being adhered to because we're not being given adequate time to attend. So it comes again to a tick box exercise. The Amaze report, why did we have it in the beginning if we're not following the recommendations? The scrutiny panel needs to look at this and there needs to be accountability. That is what I'm saying.
Thank you very much for those comments, Michelle. And Councillor Brabazon will answer your question when she's also answering her answering other questions. So because there are 2 more people who wanted to ask questions, I'm not going to bring her in just now. Anita, then Yvonne, you have your hands up.
I'll keep my question very short.
Great, thank you for that, Anita.
Again, it's on the same theme that's already been talked about many times, but I think it needs to be, because it's very, very important that we consider, look at, and really review why parents historically and currently continue not to be equal partners or considered to be equal partners around the table. And I think Michelle and Amanda raised some really profound and meaningful and significant questions around, well, why aren't we seen? Why is this not making a difference? I think the local authority really need to think about how they will build that trust, and also how we will absolutely reassure, and I'm not suggesting there's a perfect solution, that parents feel that they are and have a equal stake in this pie, which very much has come out of their oven. So I think the accountability really needs to be thought through, and I think we owe parents some I think we owe them some answers.
Thank you for that comment, Anita. Yes, accountability is something, it's an issue that's been raised by lots of other people as well. Yvonne, can I bring you in? Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say...
We can't hear you. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you fine now. Thank you.
My question is, I've been sitting on this panel. The reason I joined it, because I was someone who fought very hard for children with disability and learning difficulties in this borough. Over 40 years ago, I started, and I'm still doing it today. I went to Haringey with a child who had autism. He had autistic tendencies. He had memory cell brain damage. And what did they do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And a group of us parents kept going to them and telling them, you have got to do something. We need a school where these children can go and be treated as ordinary children, not shut in a disabled school where all of the children have 1 or 2 or 3 of the things that are matching. Now, I have to say one thing about Zena Bravizon. I went to her and she was the only one that listened and helped. But in the end, no matter how much she tried and how much we fought, I had to go to court in the end, because I got in touch with the Children's Legal Centre and they appointed a judge to me, and the judge ruled straight away that Haringey were out of order for not supplying education to the child's ability. Now, although he grew up, he's now an ordained minister. He's also runs a first aid ambulance all around the borough, and he doesn't read or write. But what he does do, and what the schools need to think about doing, is if they can't read or write and they're capable, then what you need to do is put it on a tape for them to learn it. Because if he comes home to me and says to me, Mum, can you put this on the tape for me? I read it onto a tape and he plays that tape until he gets it word perfect. Now, all disabled children have different needs, whether they're SEND or whether they're physically. But what we need to do, and we need to make the council listen, they are human beings. They were put on this God's earth to thrive. And if we don't fight for them, who's going to? And I think after 40 years, I think the council need to buck up their ideas and get these children sorted once and for all. Because why is it that Haringey are still having problems 40 years on? You should have sorted it years ago. And why should children be put in special schools if they are more than capable? Put someone in with them and learn with them. Haringey had to pay £23,000 a year for my sons to have a tutor. And then he went to school in Enfield. So all I can say is that unless you're prepared to take on board, all of you counsellors, what I'm saying and what I'm fighting for here with these parents, I only joined this parents group to see if they were suffering the same as I did. And to be quite honest with you, I think they are. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment and contribution, even personal experience as well. Amanda, I've got one, I think that's the end of all the questions. I've got a really quick question as well. I just wanted to ask you, in your opinion, like from the parents' carers' perspective, what would co-production, effective co-production would look like? If you could just sort of like summarize for us, like what do you think that would look like and how we could, achieve that? Thank you.
It would look like equality. It would look like 50-50. It would look like we are listened to, we are heard. It would look like children and young people get the services they require. It would look like the framework that needs to be put in place that parents prior have tried. It's not like they haven't tried, which is what brought the Amaze report. It would look like parents are represented in all areas of council business that affects our babies, children, young people and adults. It would look like it would look like there is a specific for the children and young people that are excluded from school because schools can't manage their behaviour, they don't have the staff to manage. It would look like a lot of the centres that have been closed down are open and in use. It would look like the council stops spending money on exercises that are not warranted. They already know what's going on. They already know what needs to happen. It would look like stop asking us redundant questions. It would look like listen, learn. If you are not prepared to learn from past mistakes, you are deemed to continue in the future. That's what it would look like.
Thank you very much for that powerful deputation, Amanda, and thank you everyone for your questions. We will now invite Jackie, Assistant Director of Early Help. Okay, sorry, before I call Jackie for her presentation on the same topic, Councillor Burbazon wants to come in to respond.
Jackie's item is a separate item altogether, but it's separate from the deputation. Yes, thank you.
Zina, yeah.
I've been invited to respond and that I should respond. I've been asked direct questions and Amanda has made her deputation and very powerfully and with great passion. So the first thing I want to say is mostly I agree with what you said. I've spent most of my working life in children's services in one way or another, and I spent many years working special needs, whether I was running an agency for families, children with learning difficulties, where I set up an advocacy project for parents and families so that they could get their statements, which was done in the mid-80s. We hired a child advocate, or whether it is when I worked in the play service and ran inclusive provision, or whether it has been subsequently when I was in early years and we established inclusive provision in our early years centres, one of which was described as the best provision this academic had ever seen in one of our nursery schools. So I think I come with some considerable knowledge and background, but as Amanda knows from the conversations that we've had and other people, it wasn't until my own personal experience of my granddaughter having special needs that I absolutely understood how families feel. So I understand why people are angry. I understand absolutely and empathise with why people feel that bureaucracies often don't listen to them. It's not always true, because these are very complex circumstances and individuals will have different experiences. But in the round, I understand that we absolutely should be working in that way. And I agree that parents are the best professionals about their children. In working in co-production, though, what we need to do is recognise that individuals must represent the whole. The Parent Carer Forum, which is now established, which the Amaze report recommended, has had, I think, 2 meetings, Amanda? At least I've been to 2. And I make a commitment here, you've asked me, my commitment has been, and I've said that at the meeting, that I will go to every meeting and be held to account. I'm perfectly happy to do that. I'm happy to be held to account anywhere, and to ensure that we move forward in the right direction. And I agree that we do need some form of learning review, call it what you will, call it truth and reconciliation, but we can't just look backwards. We do have to look forwards. We've had the inspection, and I want to say for the record, I became lead member in the end of May, beginning of June 2021 in this. The inspection came in July 2021. So what was happening in the previous year, from the previous time I was lead member, I can't say. I can only say that my own commitment is absolutely, and the director will confirm, that in our first meeting, I said special needs is on the top of the agenda, and we have to build the relationships and the trust with families. So how we proceed into some form of Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I think will be a matter for discussion with the Scrutiny panel. And I agree with you. I think there should be an SEN co-optee on the Scrutiny panel. I think it's long overdue. And I don't understand why, in a sense, it hasn't happened before. I think it would be a very good addition to the debate. But when people are on, they have to represent in the round. You can't just have your own personal interest, and that's one of the tensions, I think, in SEN, because people have their own stories. But there's it's a very, very complex landscape. I think everyone must accept it is a complex landscape, and there's a range of needs and there's a range of experiences. Turning to the issue of timing for meetings, just want to put on the record that the council does not run the Parent Carer Forum. The Parent Carer Forum is commissioned by the council and it's contracted to the British Renewal Trust. And so if the notice for meetings was not adequate, we have raised that, and I've raised that personally with the British Renewal Trust about all that. And I believe at the last meeting that you were setting a calendar of meetings. I agree, people need plenty of time. Neither, and just for the record, does the executive side run the scrutiny or publicise it, although I think it would be very good if the scrutiny meetings, children's scrutiny, was publicised on the local offer website. I don't see that that would be any particular difficulty and would ensure. But there is the SEND newsletter. There are some GDPR problems with that around people's things, but in the main, I think we're on an upward curve. I think the Ofsted inspection was very fair. I have publicly said we accept all the findings, and I think it was a very fair assessment. And there were pluses, and of course there are the minuses. The relationship with parents is absolutely the heart of how we deliver SEND. You cannot do it without the families. It must be with the families, and I know that the team that is in place is absolutely, as I am, committed to that way of working which works with families. And as I said, I think sometimes we don't all know the whole landscape. I heard today about CAMS, for example, which has got an expert parent on their transformation program. I didn't know that. I just knew it today. So that was an interesting thing to hear, and how that parent has informed their program. And that is fantastic news. I've been asked a few direct questions, and I just want to say, Michelle, you've asked me, you've said in public, I haven't replied to your emails. I had an email from you the other day, which I will reply to, but I have replied to every other one that you have written to me. And I will reply to the one you sent me the other day. Forgive me, but I have a lot of emails and I have a very large workload, so I can't always reply by return. I agree about communication. I think it is important, and certainly I'm on the mailing list for the SEND newsletter. I think it has incredibly improved. We are changing the website. I think there are a lot of things happening, but we do have a hill to climb because we have to have parental trust, and that has to come, I think, in the learning together, shaping policies together, and you'll hear from Jackie when she gives her presentation on the inspection on what's happening. I've had 3 questions asked by Councillor Palmer. I don't know if I call you Tammy, do you? What do I think has led to the deputation? Well, I think I've said that. You know, if there are decades of mistrust, SEND is, in my view, almost the most difficult area of building that trust. I agree about it's in the round, it's everything. You have to have people understanding of the impact on housing, how it impacts on every part of the family. And in my own casework, I have discovered that that is not always the case, and have advocated hard for that. But I can't turn it, you have to turn it round globally. So why do I think there's a deputation? Because people have very difficult experiences. I think it's true. But I do know that we are determined to make these changes, not because of the Ofsted inspection. We should be doing it anyway, and I know that they were moving in that direction prior to the inspection, but the inspection has given a clear focus, and I'm really pleased that we had the inspection. I've had the opportunity to visit many schools in the last few weeks, and I've seen the type of practice that's going on. Amanda mentioned children who are quadriplegic, children with visual impairment, and so on. I have seen amazing practice in our schools. And Ofsted actually did comment on the work of the schools. Amazing practice. I've met parents who were very happy with the provision that they were receiving. The Brook was open over the summer for 100 children with special needs. Our children's centres have inclusive provision. So, you know, there are upsides, there are downsides. But I do think there have been failures of communication. I think there have been systems that have not worked. I'm not the operational manager, but I rely on our officers, and I think the team now are improving the systems. Of that, I have no doubt whatsoever. And what do I commit to? I've just said what I commit to. I'll go to any meeting anywhere, meet with parents, meet with groups, coffee mornings, events. I'm up for that. I'll go to the Parent Carer Forum, and I think we must work as it evolves. And I commit, if you're going to have some type of scrutiny, call it Truth and Reconciliation or whatever title it's given, then I commit to engaging with that. Why wouldn't I? That's my job, my role. And I am determined, and I know as long as I have this role, to drive change and to look forward. As I said, from my own experience, you can always look backwards, but at some point, even if you do need to get the truth and reconciliation on both sides out the way. You have to move forward for the children and the families now coming through. So that's my reply. I think I've answered everything.
Thank you very much for that, Zina. Michelle, I saw that you've got your hands up. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hands, but effectively we are kind of closing this part of the conversation. I just wanted to give the last chance to Amanda. She wants to come in, but I'm not going to take any more questions because we've sort of, yes, Amanda, to you.
Okay, so I just would like to comment on what I've just heard from you, Zina. This isn't a fight. This isn't an argument. This isn't about who's doing what, who hasn't, it's a battle for us because it's how everybody in this room is breathing. This is the world that we live in. It's like breathing for us. So when we have lived through unprecedented times as we are now, and so there will be certain things that will be open this summer, because last year was a non-event. Nobody left their house last year. When we're talking about how it is for SEND families, it's not all bad. There are some parents that do tell me of, the good things that have happened to them and their family that is positive. But when your children will be excluded from sports centres because they don't quite fit in, or there isn't sufficient changing rooms, there isn't sufficient disabled parking spaces, for example, for the ones who are more severely, have more complex needs then. The parents have been brought to this place because the amount of changes of faces in terms of who is running SEND, the SEND department, and all the officials that work there, every single person, and I'm not having a go at you, Mary, but you're included in this, we have heard verbatim, we are sorry what's happened before. How can we move forward? We are committed to doing this. We are committed to doing that. We want to hear you. All of this. And here we are in 2021 saying exactly the same thing. It's educational neglect. It is neglect of mental health. It is neglect of the environmental structures that are not in place. For argument's sake, the CDC is now at Tynemouth Road. When we were in consultation, one side of the road has got a drop curb, but there's no drop curb on the other side. How does that work if you've got a wheelchair, if your child has a wheelchair? These are really, really very, very simple things. Zina, you say that the PCF is established. In your opinion, yeah. Because, technically it is. We, as the parents that have become involved in it, are still getting to know each other. We haven't got a chair yet. We haven't got a website yet. We haven't got a bank account yet. These are fundamental things. In the world I live in, that's not established. We are just getting there, getting to know Jeffrey and the rest of the Bridge Renewal Trust, who are not SEND specific. So they need to learn things from us. That's one point. The second point I'd like to make is that from the new buzzword is smart outcomes. What does that mean to the average person? Smart outcomes, it's a buzzword. So to that buzzword, I say you require smart provisions to make sure that the smart outcomes are satisfied. So that's all I want to say, in answer to, in comments to what you've said. I'll leave it there. I understand time is short.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for that lovely presentation and, you know, eye-opening presentation, and for raising so many valuable, important issues. Feel free to obviously leave the meeting, or if you wanted to stay, it's totally up to you, but your job with us has finished, and thank you again.
Thank you. I think just before Amanda, you go, I wonder if the panel would be agreeable, and Councillor Brabazon, to perhaps a joint scrutiny panel with adults, which is something that we've done before, perhaps in February, to have a look at some of the recommendations that have come from this, you know, as a kind of positive, you know, something that this panel always wants to seek to achieve is to work collaboratively and to find solutions. So I wonder if that feels like, you know, a sensible way to approach things. I know it's something that we've done with the adults panel, before it feels like there's a crossover.
Yeah.
Do you want me to answer?
I just wanted to, from the obviously scrutiny, children and young people scrutiny panel point of view, obviously we will be having another, I mean, following Jackie's presentation today in regards to what improvements are being proposed and how they will be achieved. We will be looking, we will be scrutinizing the SENSE strategy going forward within the next couple of months. So the time is an issue for this panel, obviously, because we've got a number of areas that we have committed ourselves to scrutinize. Other than that, if we can find a suitable time, and I think that will be, I will welcome that, and I will be happy to kind of work with the colleague on health, adult and health panel, do a joint scrutiny. But going forward, send basically the strategy that needs to be met in raised in Ofsted report will be subject of these concerns for this committee until we have seen some real and genuine improvements and changes. And throughout this process, parents, carers are welcome to be part of this conversation with us and with myself, and with any panel members, and also, so I'm happy to continue the dialogue. This is not a one-off kind of conversation.
Thank you, because the biggest issue for us is that even trying to attend a meeting like this, the time frame, we've got bedtimes, we've got the children's stuff, and it's very difficult. One thing I would really like to add, and I didn't remember to say before, is there some kind of, is there a way or the possibility that while the process is this working plan of action for, that needs to be sent on to, needs to be shown to the CQC and Ofsted. Can I ask, is it possible that this panel can review that process through the steps until its completion? Is that something that can happen?
That's certainly something that will be interest to this panel, but also what we can do, maybe we could do an evidence gathering session jointly with parents, carers, can jointly look into that response, because obviously Ofsted requested a written response to those areas of concerns that they raised. So there could be parents, carers invited to that meeting to jointly. This could be an evidence gathering session, or a session that's not in public. Obviously, it's between the scrutiny members and the parents, carers, that we jointly look into and make our own recommendation.
Oh, that would be good, because the other thing then leading off of that is, how are all the parents going and all the families going to be able to voice their opinion and their views and their feedback if it is through a digital setting? If not everybody has access to look at the local offer website, and herein lies the problem. But all the families on the register are in some contact list in the Haringey office, SEND office somewhere. So if we are talking about co-production, it means everybody. If families choose not to engage, that's different. But you cannot expect families to be involved in something and expect the parent carer forum to be able to reach out. We haven't got everybody's addresses, so that onus is on Haringey. If they really want co-production, then they need to find another way, or they need to have an alternative way of reaching the parents.
Thank you also for that comment. I think obviously co-production is something that we are all supportive of, and we all think is a good way of working with our communities. But those issues that you raised, I mean, including language barriers and other things, needs to be also addressed. And we don't want co-production to be a platform for the loud and expressive voices to be heard, but those who seldom get heard.
And that's my point. That's
so
my point.
I think
exactly.
that's a recommendation that we can take it to colleagues and just say, make it as accessible as, how could we make it more accessible to everyone, and including hearing the needs of those people that you've stated, and yeah, those with language barriers as well. But thank you very much for your time, and thank you so much.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, now I'm gonna basically slightly change the order of the agenda. Can I invite Jonathan Gardner, Director of Strategy and Corporate Affairs, Whittington Health Hospital, to kind of give us an update on the reconfiguration and implementation work that's been going on Time of Health Centre, the progress with that. Jonathan, to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Can everybody hear me? Yep.
Yes,
lovely.
We can hear you okay.
So hopefully you'll have seen in your pack a very brief paper. I won't really go through much of the detail because I think this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you remember, we did a full consultation and engagement in the move of our services, children's services, to Tynemouth Road, or the proposal of that move to Tynemouth Road earlier on this year. And there were some concerns raised as part of that consultation, which was approved, around some concerns that people had put forward. And so what this is just a brief update on that and some answers to those concerns. So as background, this is the move of services from a number of different places around Haringey to the Tynemouth Road centre, and the redevelopment of the Tynemouth Road Centre. So if you remember, we are investing some money into Tynemouth Road. At the time, we talked about £1 million. Actually, that has now gone up to 1.8 million because the need for extra stuff in there. So it's a real good investment into services. And if you remember also, we were really positive, and the feedback was positive about why we were doing this, to bring services together into one place for children in Haringey. But there were some concerns. First of all, people wanted to be engaged in the process and in the design, and we've done that. So we've engaged with the SEND group, with staff, with service users. We've done that through electronic means, but also through posters up in the services, through mail shots, and we have tried very, very hard to do face-to-face, But given COVID and given the difficulties, we didn't have much luck on face-to-face, if we're honest. Nevertheless, we have incorporated comments from various different people. We've got a Changing Places toilet facility as we promised, and we're continuing with that engagement as we look now to some of the colours and things like that in the waiting areas. Councillors and service users raised a couple of issues. One of those was parking, and we're pleased to say that we have, or we will be, when we sort of open up the new centre, we will be changing our parking spaces. At the moment, only about 3 places are for patients, all the rest are for staff. We are making that to be 8 places, most of which will be blue badge with some non-blue badge. There are further 8 to 10 pay and display places just outside the centre. And we're going to change the policy so that it is not just for staff parking generally. We have also engaged with the council, and we're yet to hear any specific, other opportunities for parking. But we feel that doubling of space for patients will really make a difference. We also have been doing a lot of work with our staff so that fewer staff will use the parking themselves with cycle to work schemes, travel card loans, and all of that. There was some concern about access, and we have engaged with Neil from the council, and we understand that our feedback and the feedback of the parents will be included in their review of pavements in the area and that side of things. Pollution, again, we're engaged there with Joe Baker, and it is recognised that pollution is kind of outside of Whittington's control, but we're doing what we can, certainly, and promoting greener travel. We're expanding our electrical car fleet for the district nurses and those that have to travel, and we also are improving the building, so that will impact on the carbon footprint. So next steps, building work has started. And it will continue to around the end of March, and we hope to open fully between January and March as we move services over in a phased way. Open to questions.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that. Tammy had her first question. Anyone else wants to ask question, please raise your hand.
Thank you. So the vast majority of these recommendations came from me, and I'm still completely dissatisfied with your responses. So I'm afraid I am going to challenge you a little bit, and that's my job. So parking. So I'm still hearing, and I think my challenge to you at the time was, if you want to make this significant change, I want to see a clear, costed plan. I want to see some specifics. So I'm still hearing some sums, some might be's, but not a lot of this is definitely happening and this is when it's happening. So I'm not overly impressed, I have to say. So one of the things that I did ask you to do, which hasn't been included in here, was to engage properly with the council's highways department around better crossings. So obviously we've got lots of children who potentially might be walking, might be travelling a distance, and actually there are no suitable crossing places. So Tynemouth Road is a really busy area. It's a place where there are lots of car accidents, cars travelling at high speed, and I note your point, and again, I don't think this is a good enough response, to say that pollution is outside of your control. There is a climate emergency. I think we all need to take a little bit more responsibility than to say it's outside of Whittington's control. One of the things that I raised with you, which we know is a fact, is that air pollution has a significant impact on children and on their development. And actually, we're talking about sending very vulnerable children potentially to a place where there are high levels of pollution. So I want to see a much clearer commitment, rather than saying it's not our responsibility. It is your response. We all have I have a responsibility. You do too. So I want to see some much clearer action. And I really do want you to come back. We've just had a deputation from SEND parents this evening. So I want us to prove that we are listening. And if you want to make this change, I want to make this place the safest place, the right place for children and their parents to come and receive services. And I'm afraid to say this evening, a short one-page report doesn't quite cut it for me.
Thank you for that, Tammy. Jonathan, would you like to come back?
Yes, certainly. So maybe my language wasn't as direct and as clear as it needed to be. So we have more than doubled the amount of car parking space available for patients. So that is a clear, direct plan. We have changed our policy around staff being able to park there. So that is also a direct change and a direct answer to your question on parking. We are absolutely confident that that will be more than enough for patients, because at the moment there aren't big issues with parking with patients at the moment, and they have very little parking available. But the service is being used across the board. So that is a direct plan in terms of parking. In terms of crossings, we cannot. I'll be honest with you. I have tried to contact the council. I think maybe it's a question for the council to say, okay, what are we doing about crossings? I have tried to contact. I put the name of the person I've contacted. I've chased, and I have been told it is in the plan from the council, and that was the response that I get from the council. So I'm very happy to do anything else on that you would like me to do. I'm very happy to do that. In terms of pollution, of course, it's all our responsibility. But if you, I guess my response is, we're doing everything in our power. So we are changing our the fleet. We're expanding our fleet of electric cars. We are making our buildings net zero, and we are reducing the cars that our staff use in terms of commuting. So that is absolutely the stuff that is in Whittington Health's power to do something about, and we are doing that. We have also contacted the council and tried to push more on that, because absolutely, as you say, we want to influence positively, and we want to work collectively to reduce produce pollution. So on those points, maybe I came across too vague, and I apologise for that. Absolutely keen that we have an influence, and we are doing that. And then in terms of the engagement, I only the other day I got a note from Sue Levinson, one of the people in the SEND group, who praised us for our engagement and said that the engagement that we have been doing on all of this is an example for everybody else. So I hope that is coming across as how we're engaging with our service users and potential service users is something that means a lot to us, and we're doing something different about.
Thank you. Tammy, you wanted to come back.
Thank you. Sorry, I just want to come back with a couple of things. So I think what I would say is, please don't think that it's okay to come to this panel with a vague one-page report. Show us your KPIs, show us your delivery plan, show us some very clear, tangible things that you are doing. How are you working towards net zero? How did you arrive at the conclusion? So you said that at the moment the medical centre doesn't, the car parking spaces aren't an issue, but that's because you don't have lots of parents with children with disabilities who are more likely to drive. So do you know for sure that your 8 to 10 spaces is going to be adequate? Can you show me the engagement that you've done that says no more than 8 to 10 parents will need that car parking space at a time? What I don't want is for parents to then come back to us and criticise us and say, well, hang on a second, you've waved something through and we're having to park a mile away and bring our child in a wheelchair, or bring our child, our severely autistic child who can't cope very well on busy roads, take them along a main road. I think it's that that's what I'm worried about. And that's my, our accountability here as a panel is to make sure that the services that we provide for young children in this borough are adequate. And that's what I want to see. So please think that please come back to us next time with a much more detailed kind of plan. And then I won't get the sense, because you're right, it is easy to kind of construe that you are being a bit flippant. And I don't want to make that assumption. I would much rather see an action plan and for you to be able to say, right, here are the things that we're delivering, here's the time frame, and here's what good looks like. So I think that's kind of, where I'd like to leave that one. But thank you. Anne, I know you wanted to come back in. Oh, okay.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. There's no further questions, so we will.
Sorry, Chair.
Anne, you wanted to also say something in this topic?
I do know that Jonathan did struggle to get engaged with our transport services, parking services very early on, and as Jonathan says, has been signposted to somebody to support. Jonathan, please do contact me and I'll take it up with the relevant director so that we can make sure we support you as much as we can to move those matters forward where we can. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Anne. I think what would be useful going forward if we could basically have another kind of maybe circulated another updates following addressing those issues. We might not need to invite you here, Jonathan, but it will be good to share that with panel members, another update following completion of the work. Thank you. Apologies, due to changing the order of the agenda, we had a slight, just need to make a decision which item to take first. So I will probably, I will invite Jackie to give us an update. Jackie is the Assistant Director for Early Health Prevention and SEND to basically share the reports in regards to the SEND strategy that's been recommended by the Ofsted and what's been strategized and what needs to be tackled. So, okay, I'll give the floor to you, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So good evening, everyone. So yes, tonight's presentation is literally just a summary of the area SEND inspection that we've had in terms of the key findings and to update you on progress that we are doing today in terms of to inform our written statement of action. We will be bringing the full written statement of action to a future meeting of the scrutiny panel in March. So in terms of the areas of focus for the CQC and Ofsted inspection, it was looking at three key things. It was very much focused on how well we're identifying children with special educational needs and disabilities, how well we're meeting those needs of those children, and how we are improving outcomes for children and young people with SEND. The inspection took place between the 5th and the 9th of July, and our report was published on the 8th of October. And the requirement is widely known that we are required to produce a written statement of action. In terms of the areas of strength, what the inspection found, talking to our parents, our carers, our partners, and local authority officers too across education, health, and care, is that we know ourselves and we know our communities well. The self-evaluation that we had to produce as part of the inspection was very robust. It was felt to be very reflective of what we considered our position to be, highlighting both our areas of a success, but really focused on the areas of improvement and what we needed to do to take that forward. They spoke to a lot of staff across the SEND system, and they found that we have staff that are skilled and dedicated. Lots of staff that were spoken to recognised the need for improvement and were very committed and passionate and ambitious for children moving forward. They also found that we have effective joint commissioning arrangements, so they could see that the services that we commission are the right services and they were responding to local need. They could see that we are starting to develop some green shoots of a culture of listening and learning, so that we were very open to that we knew it was a significant area of weakness and it was something we were proactively trying to address. And they also said that our leadership was starting to make a difference. An area that I thought you'd be interested in is that they noted in particular that children and young people with SEND in Haringey have very good educational outcomes and they are strong, and that our SENCOs are knowledgeable and skilled. However, they highlighted 3 areas for action, and these are the things that we must address. So we have to address the poor quality of education healthcare plans and our annual review process, not just in relation to compliance with timescales, but also the quality of those plans and making sure they reflect children and young people's needs appropriately and that we have the right package of support around them, particularly supporting our young people who are transitioning to adulthood. We absolutely have to address, and we've heard the discussion this evening around the lack of our partnership working and our poor communication with our children, young people and our parents and carers. Whilst they saw that as a strength within our partnership, this is an area that we absolutely have to address moving forward. And it's not just about how we communicate with families, it's about how we have accessible information. So very much a big focus on our local offer. And we have to address the unacceptable waiting times for autism assessment and the support that families receive whilst they are waiting for that assessment to take place. What I should say at this point is that these areas for action and our recommendations are only a small part of the improvement programme that we're working on. So our SEND strategy covers a whole range of areas of improvement and our vision for children moving forward. This presentation is just focusing on these 3 actions. So in terms of our actions and timescale, so you heard earlier, it is the case that we have 70 days to produce a written statement of action. So that takes us to the 11th of January. And what I would say is that prior to the inspection in July, we were not waiting for this inspection to happen. We'd already started to look at what should our improvement programme be. And that was really driven through the focus of developing the draft SEND strategy that I'll come on to in a bit more detail. But it was also around recognising that there'd been quite a lot of churn within the SEND service within the local authority. So the permanent appointment of myself as the Assistant Director in March and Mary Jarrett as the Head of Service for SEND in March. And we've been working very closely with CCG colleagues since then. And I am really pleased to report that I really feel that it's joint ownership, it's very much shared, and we're all working very much together, CCG and local authority, to drive this agenda forward. Since we've had the draft report in August, we were aware of some of the findings. There were no surprises to in terms of the things that we had to do, and we already started working back then, thinking about what should our SEND strategy say and reflect on the feedback that we'd had from parents and carers at that time. And in terms of our approach to co-production of the written statement of action, we've been going to various different forums, various different governance boards that are already in place to discuss the report. And we're also setting up a number of workshops that I'll come on to in more detail. And we've been working closely with our parent carer forum to think about how we develop this plan moving forward. Once that plan's in place, it doesn't just stop there. We'll continue to have a series of task and finish groups to really support that delivery moving forward. All of this underpinned by the SEND strategy. So in terms of the key actions that we've already taken, you'll be aware that we've been consulting on our draft strategy for SEND. That consultation ended on the 7th of November. We're in the process of collating the feedback, which we'll publish on the local offer, which will inform our SEND strategy from 2022 to 2025 for the next 3 years. To inform that process, we had a series of informal conversation events with parents and carers over the summer. We went to a range of governance boards and we did a piece of focus work with our SEND executive to say, what do we think the draft priorities should be? And the ones that you see in front of you in the screen are the ones that were shared as part of the consultation process. And I just wanted to highlight some actions that we've already taken that will support our written statement of action moving forward too. So we've increased the capacity within our statutory assessment team within the SEND service by 100%. So we've doubled the numbers of education healthcare officers. They're all in post now. They're going through a period of transition and induction. But what we see is we know that that will result in better compliance and better quality plans moving forward. We've also employed a full-time SEND communications officer who started with us last month, and their role will really be to help us to develop a communications protocol, to think about how we are ensuring that information is accessible to all families across the borough for children with SEND. And we already know that our SEND newsletter is much improved, and I've heard feedback directly from parents and carers about the fact that it feels more accessible, that it's more reflective of the information that families want to hear. So we're hoping that that will then be able to be fed into our local offer steering group that we're going to set up with parents and carers to look at how we can update the local offer to and make it far more accessible, far more private and vibrant, and something that families want to engage with. We've also, you heard earlier, we commissioned the Bridge Renewal Trust to develop and support the Parent Carer Forum. So that's been up in place since July, and it is very much in its infancy. I think there's about 9 to 12 members on that Parent Carer Forum, but there's a very clear plan, and the contract that we have commissioned is very clear on the ownership being to represent the wider voice of parent and carers across Haringey and across all demographics, including, ages of children and parts of the borough. Another thing to share with you is we insourced our travel buddy service, which went go live in September. So that service in particular is very much of our as part of our preparation for adulthood improvement area of work. And that's focused on supporting young people to independently travel to their place of learning. Very well received service, go live in September, and it all went very smoothly. So in terms of some of the key outcomes that we want to achieve, I won't read these verbatim, but these are essentially the things that we expect to see as a result of the written statement of action and the outcomes that we want to see for children. There is a strong focus on outcomes. We want to make sure that we're clear on what our outcomes look like, that we know how we're making a difference, and that we have measurable key performance indicators. We want it to be based on what families tell us they will see that will help us know that we're making the difference that we all want to for children. And it isn't just about compliance, it is very much around the quality of the services we provide and the quality of the outcomes that we want young people to achieve. So in terms of the planning that's going into this written statement of action, it's fair to say that, we have to make this progress. We have to be realistic about what we can achieve, but we also cannot have further drift and delay on this agenda. So for us, the actions have to be realistic, they have to be with appropriate pace, and they have to be delivered and achieved within 18 months to 2 years. And that's reflecting the need to really embrace and be focused on a change of culture and really thinking about what Amanda was saying earlier about not only just listening but hearing and actually taking action as a result. And to truly make the difference, it is absolutely going to be around shared ownership and accountability, and that we're working together as a SEND system. This is an improvement for just the SEND service and the local authority. It's about how we are delivering services together across the council, but also with our partners and our families. So in terms of the production of the written statement of action, we've got a draft. We've started to think about what the action should be within there, but that's absolutely been linked to our SEND strategy in particular. So building on that being the wider strategy, which will be underpinning this plan. We've got 2 workshops that will be taking place on the 29th and the 30th of November. Focused on the 3 areas linked to the recommendations. So co-production, autism diagnosis support, education, healthcare plans and annual reviews. Those workshops will be co-led with parents and carers who are representatives from our Parent Carer Forum. And the format of the workshops will be very much around sharing our thinking. So we've had the SEND strategy. This is what you told us you needed to go into it. This has been the consultation feedback. If that's aligned with this is how we think the statement of action could be delivered. We want to be really clear at identifying how will we know we've made the difference? What will we see? What will we feel? What will our performance indicators tell us? What will be the outcomes for children? We'll use the workshops to identify any new actions, things that we haven't thought of, and then more importantly, how are we going to deliver this together, and how do our partners and our families want to be involved going forward. We deliberately kept the workshops very small because we wanted them to be meaningful discussions, and I think there's an hour and a half per workshop. So there are 15 places that have been offered, but they have been open to all parents, carers, partners from our SEND executive, our Startwell board, our health and wellbeing board, our schools. We sent invitations, we sent information to our parent carer forum, to Markfield to distribute those invitations to families. We've put it in our SEND newsletter. We sent a bespoke invitation to parents and carers who were involved in the Ofsted inspection. So we've tried to reach as many parents and carers as we can through this process. And in terms of the workshops themselves, we're asking people to select one workshop, and they can only come on one day so that we can have 45 attendees at each of the workshops comprising of 90 people. But to not lose any thinking or views on the other themes, we've got a pre-workshop questionnaire, and we're asking people to complete that so that we can capture everyone's views. And I just want to give an example of a workshop that we've had this week using this approach that I think has worked really well. I think most of you will be familiar with the SEND transport failures at the start of the school term, where we had a number of children and young people who we were not able to support them to access transport to get to their place of learning safely. And as a result of those, a number of failures, we really wanted to develop a culture of how do we learn from this to make sure we don't have this level of disruption happen again. And so what we decided to do is in consultation, we actually thought about we needed to look at a SEND transport learning review. It wasn't about not accepting responsibility and accountability, because there was clearly some accountability from the local authority on some of the failures that happened, but it was about developing that culture of learning and listening, which was identified in the Ofsted inspection. So that learning review took place this week. We had 12 people at the learning review, representatives from transport providers, from procurement, from the local authority SEND transport team, from our parent carer forum, from our schools, from our governors. And we all came together and providing evidence in advance. There was 60 pages of evidence provided in advance, talking about the impact the failures had had on them, either as an individual or the wider group they were representing. So the parent care representative talked about the parents that she had spoken to, about the impact on them, on their children, on them not being able to go to work, the distress that it had caused about not having the right transport. And the review itself was very powerful to listen to everyone's experience. But what came out of the session was a real focus on, so how do we work together to create a plan to ensure this doesn't happen again? And we came up with a series of about 20 to 25 recommendations, some things that can be implemented very quickly, some things that have to be part of a much more robust transport policy moving forward. And some of those are about service improvement, and some of those are about basic fundamental things like getting our communication processes right. When we ended that review, there's a report being drafted next week, which will outline all of the recommendations and our plan to deliver against those. Everyone in the room talked about how that felt like it was really robust, really well considered, that everyone had an opportunity to share their thoughts and feelings about what had happened, to understand the impact, to understand what had gone wrong, but more importantly, they felt part of creating the change. And it was just really great for me to hear that, and thinking that this is an approach we have to absolutely adopt moving forward if we really want to create the systemic change that we've talked about earlier. So in terms of the role of the SEND executive, so the SEND executive board is the governance arrangement for ensuring that this plan is delivered against. They will make sure that the timescales are realistic, that the outcomes are achievable, and they'll receive regular progress updates. We will also publish the written statement of action on our local offer, and we will definitely be including progress updates within our SEND newsletter, but also ensuring that our parent carer forum and our parent carer representative on the SEND executive have full information to the progress that we're making. We'll also provide progress reports on request. So the Health and Wellbeing Board in particular have asked for a progress report to go to them in March. And we can also bring back the written statement of action and the full report from the inspection to March scrutiny. And at that point, I'll end and open up for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Jackie, for that presentation. I've got two hands already, Tammy and then James. I'm sure there will be more, and Lords third.
Thanks, Jackie. That's a very well thought through presentation and very good to see lots of actions there and lots of acknowledgement, I think, of where those development and learning areas are. And I think we're probably all really pleased to see the acknowledgement that the EHCP plans are just not and I know that's probably not unique to Haringey, but I think it's probably the thing that parents come to talk to me about the most is, so it's good to see that that's a real area for improvement. I think I would ask us to maybe reflect on, and I appreciate that this report was written in advance of the deputation, and I'm not actually an expert in the parent care reform. I think I'd like to hear more about that. Perhaps I might recommend that we come back with a further report. I think I've learned quite a lot about it, and I think it's really important. What I heard from Amanda perhaps was a slightly different experience. And I think it's just really important that we acknowledge, whether Amanda's reality is fair or not, it's her reality. And I think we have to, if that's the experience that she's had of the parent care reform, and it feels a little bit different to what's in the report. So maybe, Jackie, I think it's worth making sure that, that we engage with Amanda, that we hear if things aren't going, well for parents, or if it's not working for you in the right way, and if we're not giving you enough notice, for example, that we really take that on board. And I take Zena's point. We can't change it for every, we can't accommodate every individual need, but it just feels like this is a really good opportunity to learn from today, learn from the parent that we've had here today, and all the other parents that I know were kind of listening online and participated. But I would personally really like maybe for you to come back and for us to hear more about the parent care reform, its purpose, its role, the kind of scope of it, who's involved, how it all works, and perhaps to invite Amanda and some of the other participants to come back and talk to us about, what it's like being a parent and being involved, and how engaged you feel, and what we can do different, what we're doing well, and what we could do differently. So just a recommendation, Jackie, but thank you very much for your patience as well. I know you've been sitting waiting for some time.
Thank you for that, Tammy. James, then I've got Councillor James on. Yes, then you're the last, Josh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Jackie, for that detailed report. Of course, and I made this point before, that the areas that have been highlighted by the Ofsted CQC inspection are also the areas that arose out of the review of SEND by this committee in 2019-20. And I referred to the actions taken plan, which was submitted in December 2020. Now, from what Amanda said earlier, a lot of these problems go back decades. So yes, we can understand that these things don't get fixed in months or maybe even years. But I was wondering how much of the actions that you have outlined here are really ongoing actions, which they look like they should be, since they were there, they were highlighted before in response to the review here. The other point is, of course, our primary learning must be from our own situation, from the SEND parents that Amanda has spoken for in the deputation, or some of them. But I note from the recent SEND inspections that of the neighbouring boroughs, Camden, Hackney and Enfield have been inspected, and they have not been asked to prepare this written statement of action. So can we learn from them about what they have been doing that we haven't been doing? Because there are similarities in the situations in some of these boroughs. Waltham Forest did have to produce a written statement of action, went back, the inspectors went back there after 2 years and found that they had made significant progress, which is where we want to be. So how much learning can be done from these neighboring boroughs on these things? I think that's probably my second question. The first question is, how much of the work that you're doing now is already very much in process? And second, Are there things that we can learn from neighbouring boroughs, which, while they may have some of the same issues, do appear to be have done better as of now? Yeah.
Thank you, James. Jackie, yes, if you can answer the first two questions, then we've got 3 more people indicating wanting to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the progress that we have made, if we focus on the SEND reports, and apologies, there's a big echo. Is the sound okay for you all? Yeah. That's fine. So since the SEND reports, we have made insufficient progress, but I think what you've heard tonight is that this progress has been required for years and years and years. The things that I talked about on this slide in terms of the priorities.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, there's a terrible echo. I think if anyone who isn't speaking would be helpful.
Okay, I mean, maybe that you are experiencing that problem. Those of you who are joining remotely, it's, can people just switch off their mics when they're not talking, please? That might improve the sound system. Thank you.
Thank you. So absolutely insufficient progress being made over a number of years. In terms of the progress I'm reporting tonight on the slide that talked about those examples I'd given, that's all things that have been done in the last 12 months in particular. In relation to learning from other local authority areas, we are signed up when Camden are our partners in practice. So we've been having regular meetings with them. I've met with the assistant director, Mary has met with the head of service from there, and we've been looking at how we can share good practice together. And actually they've been learning about some good things that we've been able to offer, which has been really good to be able to share that. But yes, they're absolutely helping us think about not only co-production, but thinking in particular around how we do better engagement with schools and have an earlier offer of education to support children with SEND at an earlier stage. So we are working with those. We're part of the London Parent Carer Network. So we had a big meeting today where both Tony Parker, who you saw earlier, and Mary Jarrett were there together talking about the experience of the SEND inspection, working with partners to learn from good practice. So we're absolutely committed to that. I'm not able to comment on the figures around the London authorities that haven't been asked to produce a written statement of action, but what I can tell you is across the country, 60% of areas that have been inspected have been asked to produce a written statement of action. Not an excuse at all, but it just sets the context of the improvement that's required across the country, and our focus is absolutely to get it right in Haringey. Oh, apologies, Councillor, you're on mute. Still can't hear anything.
But Bully, you're on mute.
Apology, can people hear me now? Yeah, apology for that, just a slight technical problem. Yes, I'm just going to take the second round of questions. Lords, Johannes was first, then Sarah, then Josh. I'll take it in that order. Thank you.
It's just a it's a question really that I've put forward for Zena tonight, but I've been attending several meetings over the past few weeks, and the question that I've been asking is that of the SEND Executive Board, because both Amanda and Michelle have talked about the importance of accountability of this whole area. And if anybody tries to sort of search for any information on the SEND Executive Board, it is more or less impossible. Pages are not available. No one knows where the schools are represented. I'm assuming that parents are represented. I mean, I've been sent the terms of reference, but that doesn't sort of tell me about how it works and who's sitting on that board. I want names, because if schools are there, I want to know who they are, because I am a chair of a governing body and I'm very proactive within this field. And I don't know anything about the SEND Executive Board. Also, my husband and I, and he's worked in the field his whole career, we've been trying to find information without success with regards to the SEND Executive Board in Haringey. So because this is not going to work unless there's accountability. And tonight we heard that very clearly from Amanda and Michelle.
Thank you for that. You could do that, or we could just take one more question, then I can bring you in, if that's okay, Jackie. Sarah, would you like to come in and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Jackie for a presentation. I note that you've only been in post since March, and you've clearly taken on a huge job, so thank you very much. But I am concerned about the kind of mismatch, in a sense, between your presentation and what we've heard from the deputation this evening. And I just wonder what your views on that are, and really how we as a council can reach out to parents and carers and build trust again with them. Because some of these failings have been going on for a very long time, but we need to, we have responsibility to the children and young people now, and how can we improve the situation and gain the confidence of parents and carers that we're actually working with them. I find it quite upsetting to listen to the deputation and to read the comments that are in your own strategy, and I thought it was very positive that you put some of those parent and carer comments in the strategy, but they indicate a culture in which parents and carers feel that they have to kind of go into battle with the council to get what are fairly basic things for their children. And that I find is really disturbing, and I'd like to know how, in terms of concrete steps, how are we going to address that problem and build trust with parents and carers, and you'll actually start seeing them as allies, and hopefully in time they will see the council as allies in supporting and giving the best that they can to their children. And I think I had lots of specific questions that I was going to ask you, but I'm leaving them all to one side because of time. But I think that's the key, really. How do we build trust? How do we actually genuinely begin to establish a partnership with parents and carers to do the best that we can for children who really, particularly in these incredibly challenging times, and as we heard, for parents on very low incomes and so on, to do the best that we can for their children. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Jackie, do you want to come back on to those two, responding to those two questions? Then I'm going to take there's two more questions, then I'll take them later.
Thank you. So in terms of the SEND Executive Board, and it does have representation from education providers. So the chair of the head teachers group for the special schools is a long-standing member, and more recently we've had a head teacher representing nursery schools that's joined the board. The terms of reference I did thought highlighted the names of individuals and the roles and the organisations they're representing, but I will check that because I thought that was in place. So apologies if the version that you've got, it doesn't state that. We're in the process of reviewing our terms of reference. We do it annually, and we are actively going to be seeking increased representation from the education sector in particular. In terms of the SEND Executive Board, it's a standalone body, so it does provide progress reports to partnership bodies who request them. So, the Startwell Board, Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and the Health and Wellbeing Board will request reports as and when required. And we have had a request for minutes and reports discussed at the SEND Executive to be published on our local offer, which and that's a request that's been taken to a future board meeting to be discussed and approved. So I can't see any issue with that happening, but it is for the SEND Executive to decide if they're okay with agendas and papers being published. In terms of the second question, I mean, I think in summary, there clearly is a disconnect between what Amanda has been saying tonight and what I've been presenting. And not so much a disconnect, but I think it's about a perception of you and what has been a very real reality. I am very clear that we have a long way to go to build, to build up the confidence and trust from parents and carers that there is going to be real change. And all I can absolutely assure you is that I'm totally committed to this, as is Mary. And I have started to see the green shoots, over the last couple of months from the wider partnership system about how we're all thinking about how we can do this. Amanda's right. The onus isn't on parents. The onus is on, us as a partnership to work together to think about how we can best do this. I mean, I'm really delighted that Amanda and I are going to be co-leading the workshop on co-production to inform the written statement of action. So it really is a big area to think about how we do that successfully and what's going to work and feel better, and how we can have as many parents contributing to this agenda going forward. I think it's about it's a wait and see, isn't it? In order to have trust and confidence, you need to see the change happening. And it's too early to say right now, but I hope that what I've shared tonight shows that there has been some progress and there is a commitment for that to improve going forward. And I'm more than happy to bring progress reports back to Scrutiny in the future if that would help provide further assurance.
Thank you for that, Jackie.
Just to say that, we really are wanting to work with parents, and what we've heard today, and the disconnect is about decades and decades and decades of things not being right. And so it's going to take time for improvement. And though the Ofsted report didn't contain the emotion of parents, the Ofsted report is saying that the work we're doing is moving us in the right direction. We recognise that the Parent Carer Forum is in its infancy, and that to become a strong, robust and mature Parent Care Forum takes time. So no one's expecting anything to be fixed tomorrow. But part of tonight, I think, is about us sharing and owning and coming together. We officers only come to work to do our very best. I know that doesn't deliver the outcomes that you want, and so we will continue to come to this forum and others. And we were talking earlier today about co-production. It is co-production. I chair the SEND executive. Before I arrived 3.5 years ago, there was not a SEND executive. I asked, where is the SEND executive? And there wasn't one. And it takes time to build this. It takes time for the culture to develop. So hearing today that minutes or some who is it is fine. It's not I don't see that as a fight. If you ask, we will provide, and if we can't, we won't. We do need a space where we can do our work, but I'm happy to, we will take to the SEND Executive Board the questions asked, and that's just an example. We never used to have a newsletter. You may remember we never had a newsletter. I asked officers to write a newsletter. It wasn't the greatest newsletter, why we tried to recruit somebody. Now we've got somebody who's rather more sophisticated at writing newsletters. Our website is our website, and we are absolutely determined to improve it. So there are things that are improving, and and so we will continue on that journey, as with you. Do ask us the questions, and we will do what we can to respond. Thank you. Just wanted to add to what Jackie was saying.
Thank you, and Josh.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think what's clear is I think there's a real opportunity here, because based on what we've heard from Amanda earlier, and I think what on paper looks like some quite impressive engagement and plans that could be taking place. One thing I would say is that this needs to be a journey. It's not just something that's going to happen overnight. And actually, I think there needs to be a lot of learning on the job as we go. So what I've been, looking, for example, there's mention of like pre-workshop questionnaires completed from people looking to attend this engagement. What I'd be interested as well to see is questionnaires after the workshop to ask people if they felt heard, if they felt listened to, what they liked about it, what they didn't like. And I think that's the sort of thing that the scrutiny panel, I certainly would be interested in hearing about. Did parents and carers, what do they think of that engagement? Are there key principles that they would like to see underpin that kind of engagement and workshops in future? So I think it has to be an ongoing process, and I'd just be interested to hear how these meetings go, and it's something that no doubt we would love a report on in future. But I think it's positive and that people are moving in a direction together, and I think we want to hear as much as possible about this and look into that.
Thank you, Josh. Anita, you wanted to also ask a question?
Yes, I'm going to keep it very brief. I wanted to ask a question, Jackie, about monitoring data. And the reason why I'm asking about that is because I'm interested if there is any aspects of your work or patient research and thinking to sectional issues or any issues in regards to disproportionality. So are there any particular communities who are disadvantaged disproportionately compared to other communities? Are there any specific issues or general issues that some communities might be experiencing and therefore their needs are different compared to other communities? So I think, again, as Josh has just mentioned, I think this is a real opportunity to kind of build those sorts of things in. So I'd certainly be interested in how that might be happening and how and if you need to build that into the offer. And my other question, which might sound a little bit silly, and I might have missed the memo on this one. My understanding is that there is to be more children who are being...
Anita, sorry to interrupt you. We are finding it difficult to hear you. Is it? Yeah.
I can click off and on. Does that make a difference?
Yeah, it's better. It's much better now.
Okay, apologies. My second quick point was around my understanding that the borough is having more children who are being diagnosed on an ongoing basis. And my understanding also is that the funding is stretched like never before. And I am really concerned as to how those two factors will meet. How will we manage that? Is there a contingency around that? How do we manage parents and services expectations around that? I'm a little bit worried about that, because if more children are being diagnosed and we are going to improve plans, which might mean that we're going to have more focused support and intervention, how will that be funded?
Great. Thank you for that. Jackie?
Thank you. I think I captured that also. Apologies if I haven't quite heard everything. So in terms of performance, I think it's fair to say that our focus has been on recording performance in terms of our statutory timescales and statutory returns, so the information that we have to collect. And so whilst that's very robust, we're now developing a performance culture to do exactly the things that you talked about. So in relation to looking at trends, disproportionality, and looking at how those things can inform things like future service improvement, planning and commissioning. So we are intending to develop a wider performance framework than we have now that is more about the SENS system and not just around statutory information such as percentage of education healthcare plans completed within 20 weeks as an example. In terms of the funding, it is a real challenge. I mean, our focus is making sure that children who need support receive that support, but the challenge is real in terms of the increase in overspend. We do have an increase in number of children who have education healthcare plans. There's been a year-on-year increase since the SEND reforms come into place. I'll allude to that rather than the diagnosis, because I'm not sure if you were speaking specifically about a diagnosis of a particular condition, but in terms of education healthcare plans, that has grown year on year. We have developed something called a high needs block recovery plan, and within that plan it's focusing on how can we ensure that we've got projects in place that support schools and our partners to support children at an earlier stage. So thinking about things like an ordinary offer of education at an earlier stage, so educational psychologists supporting schools at a much earlier stage, speech and language therapy group work, so not waiting until a specialist response is required. Thinking about early identification through our children's centres, so identifying children at a younger age to make sure they get their support and the care and the needs that they need, and that not to become escalated or become worse and need a specialist response. So there's a whole number of projects that we're working on as part of that high needs block recovery plan, and we see that they will also link to reducing the significantly overspent budget that we have in Haringey. However, that doesn't take away from our commitment that if a child needs a range of support, then that support will be provided.
Great, thank you for that, Jackie. If there's no more question, I would like to. Yes, I think Councillor Palmer wants to come
Thank
in.
you. Sorry, really quickly. I think everything I'm hearing this evening is, it kind of comes back to a kind of really basic level of trust, doesn't it? And I suppose something that I would really like to see kind of going forward in your impact measures. So when we do sort of staff engagement surveys, we always ask that honest question, in every section around trust in the organisation. Sometimes we don't like what we hear, but it's really good, I think, to get to include that in everything that we do, every piece of engagement that we do. And I think what would be really good is to get a benchmark right now of where trust. Let's get an honest benchmark from parents of where we are in that kind of trust scale. And then I think it would be really good. And also, when you do a staff engagement, so when you put your measures into place, you try and make it better. It's always really nice to see that scale going up, and it's really motivational as well for team. I know it's really hard when you're doing this kind of work, but I just think it would be really good to kind of understand where we are now and kind of to evidence that we're moving things forward. And we might not be able to do that tomorrow, but just to be able to kind of think about that level of trust. I don't know how you measure that. There might be an impact framework already in place, I don't know. But I think it would just be really good to kind of see that the work that you're trying to put in place, it's clear to me that you are trying to do that it's making that difference in terms of rebuilding that trust and confidence.
Thank you for that. Anne wants to come in.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. I think that is a really interesting area. What I think of is outcomes and impact, and I'm thinking the work why we're here is for impact. And improved impact and outcomes for children and young people. Is it possible to have better impact and outcomes and still not trust? And I just want to be sure that we think that through, and then so that it's entirely possible, isn't it, that we are the council, we are authority, we don't always give people what they want, and so therefore they don't trust us, but actually education, health and care might be, good enough. They're two measures. We need to give some thought to that, to how we do that. And I prefer that we did that co-productively with the Parent Carer Forum, rather than that if the only thing we measured was trust, and I know that's not what you're saying, but I think if we could add in the impact and outcomes as well, that might be helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Chair, can I follow Anne on that? I just want to say
yes.
a small word, because we've talked in very broad terms, and I think maybe just a bit of fact about the money might be helpful here. You had a report, the last scrutiny, about the budget, and I think it was reported to you about the Dedicated Schools Grant. Dedicated Schools Grant has a thing called the High Needs Block. High Needs Block is a special needs funding that has been overspent for the last 3 years, every year at around 6 million a year. That is not unusual in this country, because the truth is SEND is not funded properly by this government, has not been funded properly for years and years and years. So in the context of what we're talking about, which is all very real about how people feel, of their experience, and we obviously that is their experience. It is building trust and confidence. I agree with you, it is absolutely key. But we do have a really big problem of the money. That doesn't mean you don't fulfil your statutory responsibilities. But the law and the requirements on local authorities is not commensurate. The money is not commensurate with those duties. So we have to provide education up to age 25. The money has never been in the legislation since 2014, when the SEND reforms began. It's not that the reforms were bad, but the government has been derelict in its duty, absolute dereliction in its duty to fund special educational needs across this whole country. The system is fragmented. There is massive fragmentation in education. It is extremely difficult terrain. And unfortunately, in the budget, not one penny for revenue has come for special educational needs in the spending review. None of that 2.6 billion that was announced is revenue, not one speech therapist, not one teacher, not one TA. Unless Rishi Sunak was to correct me, my understanding is it's all capital.
Zina. Amanda, you wanted to also ask a question or come in. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to make a comment on what you had said, Anne. And my background and training is in holistic healthcare. And what I know categorically is that one thing will impact on the other. So if the surgeon if the surgeon is going to do open heart surgery, he needs the respiratory specialist because they need to know if the lungs can manage. They're going to need somebody to measure the blood pressure. They're going to need somebody to make sure that the liver and the kidneys are doing what they need to do in order for the operation to be successful. In the same way that education, health, and care are interlinked in the same way. So if for the fiasco, sorry Jackie, for the fiasco that was the transport earlier, from consultation, and I went to the consultation and my son is an independent traveller, so technically I've got no business being there. But the fact is, children have left, they no longer, the bus doesn't pick them up outside their house anymore. So you have to navigate getting them to the top of the road or to the main road. And between them waking up and having to go, for us parents, we have to somehow think the way that they think and act the way that in a way that they do, so that we have an understanding. They have been our greatest teachers. And so they have to get up we take them up the road, fine. But then since there's so many sensory things going on, they get on the bus. It's not maybe the same time that it came yesterday. The driver's not the same. The care assistants that's on the bus. I'm sorry, guys, I don't know the terminology because I have an independent traveller. However, the assistants that are on the bus are not necessarily the same. From front door to that point, system overload, sensory overload. They have a meltdown. Now we go to school or college. They cannot concentrate. It's disruptive because they're in a different space. Where is the care then? The care professionals, which would be the medics, which would be the OT, which would be speech and language, all of those therapies. If I understand what I've heard about the constraints in the budgets and stuff like that, I understand, I'm not bashing anybody. All I'm saying is that the care now is impacting on the education. The health issues are already there. So in all of this that I've heard today, everything is fragmented. Nothing is, there's no cohesion. There isn't, it's not as congruent as it could be. There isn't much congruency. And something as simple as, I'll give you a nice story. I was able to advocate for my son, and he was statemented, because it was statements back in those days. The whole process from start to finish took 8 months. That isn't the case for some people. For some people, they still haven't got what they need. But I had to go to tribunal in order to get that, to advocate. And the thing that makes it distrustful is we're not believed. What the best bit of advice I got because I represented myself. The best bit of advice I got was where in the statement it says the parent feels or mum feels, or it's about the child. It isn't my need. I don't need anything. My son was homeschooled for years before he was reintroduced to the school setting. That's the case for a lot of people. But in all of this, the children's needs are not being addressed. So some people have their children taken away. But the trauma of it all is what drives the whole bus. And until we can find a common ground where, when Joshua was getting statemented, my son was being statemented, we had clear times of how long these processes would take. And I was like, oh, it really works then, because it was done in the time frame. I didn't bank on having to go to tribunal, but it wasn't about my need. I needed to stress that, as parents often do, we need to stress it's about the needs of the young people. So bearing in mind that education, health and care have, an arterial vein running through, so does the environment is involved with that. Listening to what the NHS Whittington had to say today, everything that you have brought up, Councillor Palmer, I put in an email because I was incensed after the scrutiny, being on the scrutiny, being invited to the scrutiny panel on the CDC's consultation. But it doesn't look like anything's changed. Everything that was raised, you've raised again today, but it's still it hasn't moved on. In terms of trust, the parents and the carers will begin that culture of mistrust will begin to dissipate very, 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 very slowly when people start to see tangible changes. And we all agree here it is going to take time. Of course it's going to take time. But we need to make sure and ensure that the parents, if we are talking about co-production, you have to find a way to reach all of the parents. I keep hearing the website, the website, the website. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to access everybody. One, because we know about the situation with not having access to the internet. What about the language? What about the language? I helped a parent recently apply for funding simply because she said, I'm not entitled because of this. She didn't understand. She's a Spanish speaker, so she didn't understand certain things that we have here. Other countries don't have. So how do we reach those parents so they can actually be actively involved to say what is working for them and what is not? How do we reach those? I haven't heard that today. In all of the talking and all of the discussion, I've not heard that. How are we going to reach? How are you going to reach those people? What is it that's going to fundamentally change so at least those people have access to even voice an opinion? The workshops that are coming up that I'm involved with, the co-production workshop with Jackie, personally, I don't think that 15 or 45 people in total is enough. How can the feedback of 45 people convey what's going on in the thousands? I don't know. It doesn't compute to me. How are you going to reach those people? Everything I've heard today sounds like a good idea in theory. In practice, how are we going to make sure everybody has access? And in the case of Haringey realising that cases of SEN have been rising constantly over a period of time, then what provisions were made
Amanda,
if you
sorry,
notice
I
the
don't want to
variation?
interrupt you. When you finish, there's still a couple of hands up. I'm not sure if there are, some of them might be legacy hands and some of them, some other people wants to come in. So if you could just quickly
So to sum up, it's about actually finding a realistic way to reach everybody so that everybody can have voice their opinion or express their opinion if they so choose. In the just listening and hearing that the council are aware that, you know, it's rising, the cases of SEN are rising. So how long have you noticed that it's been rising? Just like we didn't have, there were no secondary schools, there were no specific secondary schools when my son was ready to go to secondary school. And then along came Riverside School. But that was years in the making. But when these children were in infant and primary, there's a strict, distinct possibility that they are going to become secondary school children. So we have to make provisions for the future as well as what's happening right now, plus the historic stuff that needs to be kind of sorted out. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions? I'm not sure some of the hands, if they are legacy hands or there are more questions, but I'm quite keen to close this part of the meeting because we have, it's coming to 9 o'clock and we have a number of other agendas on the items on the agenda. Sarah, you wanted to come back and then I see Yvonne's hand. Okay, can I just take quickly 2 questions from you, then we can wrap this up.
Yeah, no problem. Just to say, Jackie, I had put some basic questions in the chat about the consultation process and so on, and it would be good to get a response to those. I'm happy to take it in writing. And I just also wanted to respond a bit to what Councillor Brabazon said about funding, is that while I obviously fully appreciate the lack of funding and the result where we are as a result of 11 years of austerity, at the same time we can't make funding an excuse for letting these children down, and we really need to do the best and make sure that we're doing the best that we can. Thank you.
I didn't give it as an excuse, I gave it as a factual position, and in fact we always fund the services which are in the plans. That is the law.
Okay, thank you for that, Zina. Yvonne, you also have a question, or is that a legacy hand?
No, just a simple
Yvonne,
question.
can you please make it short, because this debate, we still got a number of items to discuss and the time is really pressing.
Okay, I just want to say that I've listened to all the talk and everything else, and also to the support that's supposed to be around. I sincerely hope this panel as a body and the staff that are here have taken note of everything that has been said, because there's, well, you know as well as anybody, the parents out there are beginning to think they've been deserted, and it's a shame that there isn't a lot more people that could come forward and speak out for the children with SEN or any other complication that needs addressing. And I'd like to say to the panel here tonight, I sincerely hope, especially the councillors, are very sincere and that they will support more and more so that we don't get into this terrible struggle in the next 40 years. Thank you. Makbule.
Thank you for those well-made comments, Yvonne. I will take them on board. Thank you, Jackie, also for your presentation and for, is there anything you want to add in the last minute? Because I just want to close this part. And thank you very much for your time and answering
You're
questions.
welcome. Thank you.
Next agenda item is Cabinet Members' question. Well, Councillor Brabazon has been actually answering our question throughout the meeting, but now we will be just basically to give an opportunity to the panel members if they've got any other question. And there were a couple of questions by Lords, written question, 3 written questions. And if there's anything else that Councillor Brabazon wants to add or members want to ask.
In the written questions, the officers have written answers, which I'm happy for them to give because they were quite detailed.
Due to time, would it be helpful if we just emailed the responses? Because it's due to time. I can see
we
nodding.
can do that.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering about the agenda altogether, because I think we've got 2 other items to come.
Yes, can I ask Rob a question? Rob, are we able to continue with the meeting beyond 9 o'clock, or what's the sort of standards on that? Because
you can continue. I mean, the work programme item. I mean, it's me presenting, and blink and you'll miss it. It's going to be very, very short. So the only other item besides that is the Children's Social Care Annual Report. So.
Yeah. And for that one, can we assume that everyone's read it and we just take questions? Because I'm mindful that for time.
We can do that, and also if members got any subsequent question, they can email Beverly Hendrick and ask more question.
Yeah.
Okay, I do recognise that. Sorry, it's been like the time is been an issue tonight because obviously we've got lots of other important issues to discuss. Okay, so should we just completely? I mean, Zina has answered lots of questions, and there will be written answers to the question. And I'm gonna, Children Social Care, item 10, Children Social Care Annual Report. The allocated time was usually 20 minutes, but due to time pressure, I'm going to not ask Beverly to present the report because she has submitted a written report. I'm just going to ask the panel members and co-opted members if they've got any question, urgent question that they want to ask on the report. Otherwise, the report is, we just note the report and make recommendation. Okay. Any question? Yvonne, your hands is up. Is that a legacy hand? Possibly.
Can I?
It's a legacy.
Can I, Chair? Can I just check with Bev? Bev, are there any key points you want to come across? Because I know that an awful lot of effort and time has gone into producing this really, really good report, and then to not be able to present it, you know, we do send our apologies. So I just want to know, are there key things you'd like the meeting to know? Or Bev, would you suggest we bring it back to another agenda?
Yeah.
And I think that there are some things that would be helpful to talk through it, and perhaps coming back to another meeting would be helpful.
If Chair would accept that, then, and I can see nods in the room.
I mean, I'm happy to accept that. And also, Councillor James got, Sarah got that question. Josh, do you have a?
I was just going to say, if it does get brought back, I think it's only fair that it's bumped up the agenda as well to make sure we don't skip it again.
So we will probably, Sarah, would you like to ask your question? Or?
Well, it might be redundant if you're saying the report can be brought back. I have some questions about the report, but if we're going to bring it back to another meeting, then I'm happy to defer those questions to another meeting.
Okay, great. Because we have agreed to bring the report to our next meeting, but making sure that it's on the top of the agenda so that the report gets a good opportunity to be heard. Yvonne, do you have a question? Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, and apologies, Beverly, for not having had the chance to present the report, but we will bring the report back to a future meeting. thank you for all the officers and everyone else who attended this meeting. The last agenda item on our meeting is the work program update, and I suppose for that you guys don't need to be here, so that's absolutely fine if you wanted to go. Thank you very much.
I was about to mention that it will be a bit of a squeeze fitting in the children's social care item to the next meeting, because it is the budget one, and we've also got the Safeguarding Partnership annual report plus the outcome of the youth justice thematic inspection. But we can talk. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, that's fine. We can do it that way. Yeah.
This is a special meeting you suggested.
Yeah, I'll just do it outside, just an informal meeting. Okay.
Just a one item kind of meeting, but a meeting that we don't need to be on. Yeah, but we'll. Thank you.
It is a hugely important report. Social care, child protection is the most important issue.
Absolutely. No, that's why we wanted to make sure that we have members have an opportunity to have a proper discussion on that. I mean, I read the report. There are so many good things and there's so many interesting areas that we could definitely have a good conversation on. I do agree with you, Zina. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Work program update.
Yeah, and the only other thing to mention was the scope in terms of reference for the review on child poverty will be going to Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 29th of November. It's going to be a short review, 2 meetings. The first one will look at key data regarding child poverty and how it's addressed within the borough plan, how the borough plan has developed its approach to child poverty since its inception. And the second one, the proposal is that at the moment that we get someone along from Tower Hamlets who've just had just undertaken a review on poverty, including child poverty, and also possibly somebody from the Child Poverty Action Group. The aim of the exercise will be to flag up some areas for inclusion in the refreshed borough plan. The first meeting of the review we were looking at shortly after the start of the new year, so beginning of January. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you for that work update, Rob. The date of our next meeting is 4th of January and 7th of March. And thank you very much to everyone, to co-opted members, to our deputy Amanda, and to members, for everyone who attended. And I wish you all a good evening. Thank you. Sorry, Rob, I didn't realize that the